In late 1999, writers Jeph Loeb and Joe Kelly took on Superman. Over the next 2 years, they would upgrade his city, test his heart, warp his reality, elect his greatest enemy, and bring intergalactic war to his doorstep. It's the final chapter in the Triangle era, one of my most cherished runs, and the subject of a 7-part Digging for Kryptonite epic. It's the Loeb-Kelly era. Welcome to a special bonus episode of Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss the aftermath of Our Worlds at War is returning guest, Adam Daltorio. Welcome back.
Hi, Anthony. I'm so happy to be back. I'm so happy that you thought I did good enough the first time that I can come back. That was a very pleasant surprise.
Please, I'm happy that you had a good enough time that you wanted to come back.
Of course. I said anything you need me for, I'm here.
You did say that, yeah. And I took it to heart. I took you at your word. I'm like, well,
and then you were like, oh, yeah, he wanted it quick. Very nice.
Yeah, you got to be careful what you offer. I'll take you up on it. So before we get into the specific portion of issues that we're going to talk about, the post Our Worlds at War landscape in the super titles, I wanted to just toss the ball to you, general open-ended question, go with it where you like. I'm curious whether it's Our Worlds at War specifically or the Loeb-Kelly era generally. Any thoughts you want to share? I'm curious kind of what space, if any, that run occupies in your larger fandom.
Yes. And I think this is obviously going to come up more. For me, I'm more of a Joe Kelly guy. I might have talked about that episode 1. My impression of this era is that every time I read through it, it's the one-shots that hit me hard. Is that if you read through the whole thing, you do find like, oh, this is a hidden gem. Oh, this is a hidden gem no one talks about. No one talks about this issue. And I do think it's to its detriment that people think of the bigger events like, I'm sorry if this like kind of goes contrary to your last episode or whatever, but I'm not big on Our Worlds at War, and we'll get more into that. But to me, I think that a lot of people maybe don't take note of this era because of those big events where they see inconsistent art and inconsistent quality. And everybody, it can feel a little kitchen sinky. But if you hone down on the one-shots, like obviously Action 775, Action 800, the one we have today, that the choice issue, stuff like that is what really shines to me.
No, I totally hear you. I mean, from my perspective, I just love it all. I love the bigger storylines. I love some of those more one-offs as well. So I totally get that perspective. It's interesting. People will have already heard our Worlds at War discussion, but that's one of those storylines where in the past, I think I probably would have agreed with you more about that one. And I really came around on it.
Nice.
All that being said, we're going to start with the immediate month following Our Worlds at War. So we're going to go through each of the 4 Superman titles in that month. So these were all published in September 2001. That will become particularly pertinent, especially when we get to the Adventures of Superman issue in terms of its timing. But we start with Superman number 174 by Jeph Loeb and guest artist Steve Lieber, who drew almost the entire issue, but for the final page, which Ed McGuinness returned for. And in this issue, we have Superman rebuilding the Kent farm while Lois reads Martha's journal to him. And at this point in time, both Kents, Jonathan and Martha, are MIA. Clark and Martha will be reunited by the end of the issue, and we, the readers, will learn that Jonathan Kent is still alive. We see him get into a truck. He's a bit out of sorts, which is a thread that will continue for a little while, but we at least learn that he's okay. And I suppose most notably from this issue, because this is a change that will last for a little while, Superman changes his costume. He modifies the shield, replacing the yellow with black to signify this period of mourning, that he's undergone this change after all the loss suffered during Our Worlds at War. So I'm curious, how did this play for you, this issue generally, and especially this shift in his costume?
Yeah, so in general, I will say, so Our Worlds at War did not work for me because I think of it as an example of something over heightened to the point of I stop feeling emotion if they just keep throwing at me big, big, big. And reading this, I very much felt like it was comparable to Death of Superman and then Funeral for a Friend, where it was like, I think people tend to agree, like, if you just read Death for Superman, there's not much meat on the bone, right? And then Funeral for a Friend, it kind of sinks in. And so this did feel to me like, okay, now I do feel like that was a war. And that wasn't just kind of a normal superhero big bash, I guess, you know? So in general, the issue very much worked for me. I was actually very surprised how much I liked it. The costume, I don't need a lot of explaining with my costumes. I do just think it looks undeniably good. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a great look. Yeah, I have a few thoughts on this, and not even just with respect to this first issue, but this entire month following Our Worlds at War. I think thematically our through line is Clark figuring out first if he's even going to resume his duties as Superman, and then once we get past this issue, what that's going to look like, how he's going to operate. So I think it's an interesting exploration over these 4 issues following the big crossover. As far as the costume change, yeah, I like it. I think it's very striking. It's one of those things where it's subtle, and I appreciate that. And it's the sort of thing that it's not in your face. It's not such a radical departure from the traditional look where you say to yourself, "Oh, they're gonna have to change this right away," or something like that. And they stuck with this for a while. This will ultimately go away at the conclusion of the ending battle storyline, which we talked about in one of our previous episodes. After everything he goes through with Manchester Black and thinking that Lois has been murdered, but refusing to kill Manchester, he really comes out the other side and returns to the traditional red and yellow. But for this period of time, it felt like an appropriate change. And in recent years, we had a version of this on the television screen in the Arrowverse's Crisis on Infinite Earths event with the Brandon Routh Superman. Right?
Yeah. I didn't watch that.
Okay, fair.
But this is a good amount of time after Kingdom Come, yes?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's not like this came out of nowhere. It's definitely evocative of that. But I guess the reason why I had the Arrowverse television moment in my head is that the Brandon Routh Superman, he has this great moment. Even if you didn't watch it, maybe that you've come across this on social media or clips or whatnot. But it's where he's explaining why he changed the costume and what it signifies for him, and this whole notion of hope cuts through. Hope is the light that lifts us out of darkness, like the red cutting through the black in the shield. So yes, of course we have Kingdom Come that paved the way for this. But like I said, I just kind of had that connection point with the TV event, and it made me like this turn in the comics even more. The other thing that I wanted to mention, we've been talking about this a lot in looking at the Jeph Loeb issues, his use of narrators in the vast majority of his stories. And that's an aspect that really makes his issues sing for me. And until this point, we hadn't had Martha Kent represented. And she is here by way of her journal. I don't mean to nitpick. I do wish, though, that the journal entry read had been kind of one singular entry where we got to kind of have Martha tell a story, so to speak, as opposed to what we got where there are these little snippets. Because time is passing, he's rebuilding the farm. Clearly time is passing. And so we're just kind of getting these glimpses into her journal entry. So it's really jumping around, which is fine. I guess would have preferred a little bit more of a consistent passage.
I like the glimpses. I think that made it feel more full is the word I would use. I liked that. I don't know. I like the journey of it. I think I did just disagree with that little nitpick.
Hey, this is what we're here to do. It's fine, and it's one of those things. The next time
I'm out of here.
Yeah, get out. No, I mean, and it's one of those things. The next time that I go to read that, I'll keep that in mind, and I might have a different perspective. So, and I'm glad it worked for you.
You're right, though, to also point out that it's Martha who doesn't get a lot of time to shine, other than having a page where she brings out a pie. You know what I mean? So I think that contributes to why I like, this looks like a large section of her life instead of just one snapshot.
Hey, that's fair. It's funny because I can't help but think of Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale's For All Seasons. And there, too, is an instance where in the original miniseries, Martha did not have an issue from her perspective. But then years later, I think it was in Tim Sale's issue of Solo, they did a short story that fits in between the pages of For All Seasons, and it's Clark's prom night, and it's from Martha's perspective. And oh my God, I love that so much. I guess I was hoping for something kind of along those lines, but I was just happy to have her represented. If I have another nitpick, I really did love this issue, but I have one other thing.
No, please.
I'm always there for Pete Ross, justice for Pete Ross. I will forever be on that kick. But he and Lana, they pay a visit to the farm during this period, which is great. And I'm glad that they were both there and they had this moment with Clark. Pete talks to Clark and Lana talks to Lois. And I feel like Pete's a little too flip as he's getting out of the helicopter or plane or whatnot and coming over to Clark. He's like, what do you say? What do you hear? It's like, I don't know, man. My parents are missing. Like, read the room.
I did read this and think like, oh, Pete seems stupid in this issue. Like he seems a little bit like a fool. I don't know. And I personally don't like his status quo at this time. I kind of just like him staying in Smallville, and not everyone from Smallville needs to go on to be a big thing. And I don't like that because I'm a Silver Age guy, and in the Silver Age it was the thing that he knew Clark was Superman, and so that contributed to that. He just seems like a dope in this issue.
I hear you. I mean, that's the thing with Pete Ross. If you don't get those constant flashbacks to him in the tent, watching Clark change into Superboy, you lose a little something. But
yeah, I don't think Pete Ross works in this era. I think he's a overthought thing. I don't know.
Okay, well, we'll put a pin in that. I'm gonna have We have a special coverage coming up. I don't fully disagree. I do think there is a way that more can be done with him. But I think in terms of what we see, yes, I think it leaves something to be desired.
Yes.
In fairness.
Yeah.
And I thought the reunion with Martha was very emotional. And I'm glad that they at least didn't string us along as to whether or not Pa was still alive. They delay his reunion with his family, but at least we see him at the end of the story getting into that truck. Now, we'll continue to mention Pa, but I guess while we're here, eventually he does reunite with the family, and there are signs of mental deterioration. He can't find his glasses in issues to come, and then they're on his head. Or he's looking for his car, and Martha's like, we walked. Or in an upcoming issue, he doesn't recognize Lana Lang at the doorstep, and he plays all of this off. So there's a period of time here in the comics where, and I remember this at the time, where I was like, oh no, I mean, is this just sort of this post-traumatic stress disorder, and this is how it's manifesting? Is it just signs of old age? He's deteriorating. Ultimately, what we do find out post-ending battle is that it was Manchester Black who was messing with his head. So there was actually a very specific, fixable reason for it. But yeah, for a period of time, you did wonder and worry about Pa.
Yeah, and I actually think that's a little bit of a disappointing cop-out. Because I do think there is a lot of people who can relate to like, uh-oh, my grandpa's not acting right. And that is a lot of this era too, is that I'm sure you've already talked about, like with the Parasite Lois. It's like, ooh, something's going on here. Human drama's going on here. And this is just a comic book thing in general, I guess, is like, no, it's not human drama. It's a superpower. It didn't quite work for me in this era.
Okay. I hear you. I guess on the Pa front, if it was something that they were all going to commit to and really show the reality of it and follow it through, I would have been open to that. But absent that, I'm glad there was at least an accounting for it. It wasn't just that they just kind of hand waved it or just kind of forgot about it. But yeah, I get what you're saying. The last, I guess, thing about this issue is its cover. This is one of my favorite covers of the Superman costume, just kind of folded up.
Oh yeah,
and hanging on the chair with the shattered picture of Jonathan and Martha. And a largely white background. Very, very striking.
Yeah, McGuinness. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah. Shall we proceed to next week's issue?
Sure.
All right. So Adventures of Superman 596. This is the cover. It says, "This is not a job for Superman." And this deals with the post-war cleanup efforts, the rebuilding. And right there on page 2, if I'm not mistaken, we see imagery of the twin Lex towers smoking.
Wild. Yes.
And this came out on September 12th, 2001.
Insane.
Just an eerie coincidence. I know a lot has been said and speculated about this. We mentioned this in our last episode. Just a coincidence that had been written, drawn, printed, shipped before the terrorist attacks. DC made these issues returnable. I don't know how many copies were actually returned. I think this became a bit of a collector's item, which, you know, it is what it is. That's kind of the nature of this. That often happens with books of this sort of nature, I suppose. But not to get too heavy with the 9/11 of it all, but I know I have a few years on you. So at this point in time, like you were pretty young, right?
Yes, I was 7.
Okay.
So I have a memory of what happened, or like I remember where I was and everything, but I definitely had a naivete of like, this is gonna change things. That did not compute with me.
Yeah. So I'll keep this relatively quick. I don't want to weigh this down too much, but I was reflecting on this with this issue, but also Our Worlds at War generally, because that whole storyline came out in the summer between 8th grade and high school for me. So it occupies a special place. And I think it would have absent 9/11, because even as these issues were coming out and I was reading them, I knew I was on the verge of a personal shift. I was entering the next chapter. I was heading into high school.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I would have always kind of remembered that time specifically. And then, of course, 9/11 happened. And so I was 2 weeks into high school. I went to an all-boys Catholic high school. And that Tuesday morning, we were in the auditorium having mass, because that's what you do. And at the end, the president of the school came up and explained what had happened. And over the course of the rest of the day, some classes were sort of business as usual, but I would say most of our classes, as we went through the day, we were just watching the news. And it's one of those things, I was old enough to, I think, have more of a sense of the gravity of the situation. But even with that, I don't think I really knew, like, just the magnitude of this.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things, prior to that, I don't think I had any conception of what terrorism was, but I sure as hell did after that. So all that to say, when I kind of look back at this time and this run of comics and whatnot, it's the sort of thing, it really did mark the end of a very specific era for me personally, and on a larger global sense. So that just, like I said, puts it in an even more distinct category.
Yes.
So all that to say, just a very unfortunate coincidence with the imagery in this. But yeah, what did you make of Clark's inaction in this issue? Because he gets called out by Lex, which is par for the course. But then even John Jones is like, "Hey, man, there's a lot to do. What you doing?"
You know, this is a bigger Superman subject that I do struggle with, and I don't have an answer. I don't have a hard line in the sand of how much should he interfere bit, because it is my belief that Siegel and Schuster would have just no concerns. You know what I mean? Siegel and Schuster Superman just would rebuild and just would end the war if they had their way. And I really do like the line I wrote down that Lex specifically says that you don't do anything, but you get to take credit for inspiring us. You can just say, "Oh, I inspired." I really like that line. And then I do think it's an effective counterpoint that I think the most effective counterpoint, believe it or not, is like, first of all, nobody's in immediate danger. And that it was the workers that were like, well, we need a job. That's essentially how I took it. It's not so much, oh, we have to do it because we have to, inspire ourselves. That's not so much working for me as much as it is like, no, we have to function as a society. I like the more hands-on approach to it, I guess.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, I mean, because ultimately what Superman articulates to explain himself is just this notion of, I can't do this for everyone, or I shouldn't do this for everyone. Humanity needs to rebuild itself. And this is right after he saves that construction worker, who then has this whole speech, like you were saying, about how he and his coworkers presumably agree. They want to do this job themselves. And yeah, I don't know exactly where the line is between we want this because we need a job and we need something to do versus this is our world and it's our responsibility.
Yeah. And I wasn't saying the issue was saying exactly what I was saying, but that's what I like, I guess.
Yeah. No, fair
and I
enough.
like that it feels like that to me. I can extrapolate that from this issue, even if it wasn't intentional.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, and from Clark's perspective, I mean, I think he's honest as Superman when he's explaining why he's been holding back. I'm sure it's also kind of wrapped up in this post-traumatic stress that he's dealing with as well. I mean, I'm sure there are multiple forces at play, but I do take him at his word when he's not being lazy. He's not anything that you might pin on him or that Lex would, but rather there really is this conscious decision that he's making. Now, is perhaps could there be an argument that there's a middle ground somewhere? Like he doesn't have to do everything, but maybe he could do some things.
That's where it gets hazy, and that's why I brought up like, well, if no one's in danger right now, I would definitely draw the line of and this comes up in a Man of Steel issue. He's not going to let somebody get hurt because someone tells him it's for the greater good. That to me is, I feel like he should just be incapable.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like this issue revolves pretty specifically upon the physical rebuilding efforts and his lack of participation in it.
That's why this worked so well for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does, it's a different avenue, but this definitely touches upon these larger questions that we've seen explored in things like Peace on Earth and whether he should insert himself in trying to cure famine and whatnot. And I know we mentioned, of course, the smoking towers at the beginning, but there is also, I mean, to really pile on when we see Jean in the monitor womb of the watchtower on the TV screens, you see the actual World Trade Center with damage to it. So
I know, crazy.
Yeah, really, really crazy. But yeah, I think another strong issue here. There was a bit of a detour with Weather Wizard. I don't know what we were supposed to get out of that. Maybe
this leads to a Flash story that I remember. So I just ignored that.
Yeah, and there is an editor's note about, follow current issues of Flash for more. And I was reading Flash at the time. I just don't remember exactly where that was going. But that felt good. A little bit. Yeah. So, and of course, that issue was by a regular creative team of Joe Casey and Mike Wieringo. And then we get to Man of Steel 118 by Mark Schultz and Doug Mahnke. Mahnke's last issue on the title. He'll be heading over to JLA with Joe Kelly. They'll be on that book for a 30-issue run, and then they'll also do a 12-issue Justice League Elite maxi series. And by the way, I have not forgotten about that Kelly, Mahnke, JLA, and Elite work. Plans are afoot, so stay tuned for that. We haven't forgotten about that. But this is a very interesting issue where the Linear Men drag Superman before the Quintessence for this hearing over his actions during our worlds at war. And the essential charge is that he interfered with the natural order in stopping Imperiex, the embodiment of entropy, in convincing Black Racer not to take the soul of John Henry Irons, in interfering with Kismet, who had been inhabiting the body of Sharon Vance, a.k.a. Strange Visitor, who gave her life to crack the Imperiex armor. So all of these events where he inserted himself, interfering with the natural order. I love how the Spectre, there's this encounter, Spectre is present throughout the story. And I love initially Superman mistakes him for the antagonist. And he's like, to Hal, this is the Hal Jordan incarnation. He's like, you're going to judge me? And then Hal's like, no, I'm your advocate. And I was like, that's worse.
He's his lawyer.
That's even worse.
Yeah.
But this all builds to, I want to toss this to you and have you do the honors, because it really builds to, I think, such a standout scene where Superman speaks up for himself.
Yes, I loved this issue. I wish you could see my original notes. I had it like list by list, and I circled this one and I put hearts around it and stars around it. I was like, whoa, I forgot how good this issue was. And this kind of goes back to what I was talking to, that it feels like to me that it's a big issue of Superman is different from the gods because he does focus on the small stuff, and he does not. I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but it was
no. I think you're right on the money there, because he talks about how, and I don't have the full quote in front of me, but what really resonated was just this notion of he says something like, I'm not doing this with the proper order of the universe in mind. For me, it's personal. I do this to protect the people I care about. It's about the people. It's not about ensuring mechanically functioning universal order. Like, that's not what I'm about. And then this leads to this was such a great turn in this issue, and a pleasant surprise from the Quintessence, where they essentially agree. And their whole point is like, yeah, you're not in trouble. It's sort of them acknowledging that there has now been a shift. They're in the era of free will. He has changed things. He has disrupted the natural order. And now this is in the hands of him, people like him and whatnot. And I think my favorite part of this is when they basically tell the linear men, like, you guys got to relax. Like, get out of here. That they've been so like dogmatic in their approach to preserving, because their whole thing is they've seen the end. They've seen the end of time, and they know what's supposed to happen to get there. And they're so fixated on that. And the Quintessence is basically saying, like, you gotta ease up, and banishes them. And then Leary Lee ends up in human form, taking a job in the final page as the babysitter of Lena Luthor. I have no idea. I don't think do you know if this is ever touched on again?
No.
I don't think it is.
I don't think. Yeah. It's like on the list. I noticed a couple of things. I was like, I don't think they did anything with that. They were throwing a lot at the wall in this era.
This goes back to when you were here and we talked about the adventure comics run by Jonathan Manapul, Project Alien Farm. Still waiting on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Still waiting on that.
There was a thing like, what issue was this with the last page looked like the Creature Commandos? Did that happen?
That was the Dracula issue of the Superman title.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, we'll get to that later.
I know. I had the same thought there too. I'm like, oh, where does this go?
Yeah, it looks like a cool team.
Yeah.
But I going back, I like that you said personal. That was a word that I was searching for. And this is definitely a thing that it hit me different now than it used to. Because I'll just say, like, you know, we're in an era where a lot of historians and experts on subject matter are being asked, like, hey, what do you do when fascism takes over? And I don't know if I can quote a certain person or credit this to somebody or if it's just general advice, but I heard like a thing of, well, the powers that be kind of benefit from you being like overwhelmed through a lot of stuff. And what really actually helps is just focus on your immediate neighborhood. And just like even little things like, hey, don't go out and buy a screwdriver, go to your neighbor and ask to borrow a screwdriver. Just like little stuff like that adds up, and it keeps you tight and keeps you centered and just helps you have an eye on the little things. And this issue really, if not outright saying that, it hit the feeling of that, and it hit me hard.
You know, as you're saying that, it makes me think of an issue that we'll touch on in just a little bit. It's sort of the one-shot special that follows the end of the Man of Steel series, Superman versus Darkseid, Apocalypse Now, where Superman battles Darkseid for the life of John Henry Irons, and Natasha is narrating the issue, and it begins and ends with this notion that Superman saved a life once, one life, and that made all the difference.
Yes.
So yeah, I agree with that. No, this has come up in like every episode that we've done, but at the time, and many guests have echoed this, but I've said it myself, like at the time, the Schultz-Mankey issues were not necessarily my favorite as I was going week to week reading the books. And I've really found I get so much more out of them now. And I feel like I kind of slept on that run. They're really, really good. That's been maybe one of the most unexpected delights of going back through this again. I'm like, oh man, like these were a lot better than I think I gave them credit for. And
that's
this
what I was saying at the beginning. You find gems. You're like, wait, why don't I think about this one?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm happy to hear that these are my favorite sections. So
nice. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And then the last issue in this month following Our Worlds at War is Action Comics 783. I think almost entirely, if not entirely, dialogue free, but the words that we get throughout the issue come in two forms. There's an article that Clark Kent is writing that runs across the top panels of each page, and then we have dialogue that is presented in caption form that we ultimately find out is sort of this offer that Superman is making to a quartet of villains: Stone Emperor, Ocean Master, Scorch, and Major Disaster. And he's offering them a chance because they are all trying to take advantage of the terrible state that the world is in. They're making matters worse. They're trying to profit, to exploit the situation. And so he's engaging each of them in battle, but then he does make each of them this offer of a second chance. And this is inspired by a moment with Pa Kent, who, as we've said, at this point in the story, still MIA. And I love in this issue, we see Clark on the farm and there's the rake stuck into the ground next to him with Pa's hat on it. Like he's still, this is a pretty consistent thing throughout Kelly's run of seeing, and Loeb's as well, but of seeing the sunrises between Clark and Jonathan. And it's like Clark's still carrying on the tradition, even though his dad's not there at the moment. Yeah. But there's this moment that Clark recalls of when he was a kid and there was this bully at school and he wanted to essentially, knock him out or retaliate physically. And Pa said to him, he's like, look, it's within your right to settle the score when someone lays hands on you. And I was like, yep, that's Pa Kent. He goes, but is there not another way? I'm paraphrasing, but is there not another way? Like, what if you offer that second chance to do something different, offer a new way? And that's what Superman does for these four villains. And he talks about how he's like, what a gift it is to give somebody a second chance, an opportunity. And 3 out of the 4 walk away, but Major Disaster accepts. So how did all of this play for you? And what do you make of the fact that it was that villain out of the 4 that accepted?
I love this issue. First of all, I love this issue. I really like, believe it or not, that like 3 do walk away. I do think in modern comics, villain redemption is way too common. And I actually really like, to me, like, this is a weird quote, and I think 90% of Superman fans do not agree with this. I think it was Greg Rucka who said, like, Superman is I think he said Lois is a optimist that acts like a pessimist, and Superman is a pessimist who outwardly is an optimist. Something to that effect. And I actually really like that quote, and I actually think that attitude kind of has more value than just pure hope. Because I like that Superman has this in his head that, yes, most of the time this will not work, but I do have to continue to try it. That's a very valuable lesson, I think, to me personally, and good advice, I think. Now, it specifically being Major Disaster is odd. I think they could have picked a better one, but then we start talking about like who's worthy of redemption, who's not, and that's a whole can of worms. So I don't know. It's weird. It's an emotionally charged villain, so it's a weird choice.
Yeah. I guess I don't feel that strongly. And I guess in my mind, it ultimately doesn't matter to me. Like what matters is that he made this offer to them. And honestly, it still would have worked for me, even if all 4 of them walked away. But he's like, well, at least I tried. But the fact that one accepts, that says a lot. And regardless of which one it is, I mean, Scorch might have been interesting because at least she was a Superman centric villain. Yeah. So we'd had a little bit more time, but really, it's like I said, to me, it doesn't matter. I think it's the fact of the offering and that one of them took him up on it was just a nice, and it's one of those things where I mean, I don't know how often I've done this in my personal life. I like to, hopefully I have at points along the way, and hopefully I'll continue to, because I think there is something to be said for it. Like, this really did resonate with me of sometimes you think that things can only go one way, but maybe there is another opportunity, and to just sort of, now this is an extreme situation where we're talking about these villains who have killed and caused this. I mean, there's a lot wrapped up in that, but I'm just thinking about sort of maybe antagonistic interactions you might have with somebody and how quick it might be to just kind of write them off or tell them off or whatever it might be. But I don't know, maybe there's a conversation to be had. Maybe there's something that they're going through that you're not aware of. And then you have this conversation and a new path is forged. So it's just, I found it inspirational. I hope to be able to put that in practice.
I think it's definitely something that comes with age too. In my experience, what this looks like in real life is that an encounter happens and then years go by and you've both matured and then you come to like, hey, you know, but I separate from that, do you know if like, did Major Disaster go on to, did he become part of like a obscure Justice League, or?
I don't know offhand. I mean, I haven't done my reread of Kelly's JLA run, so I don't know if he pops up there. We'll put a pin in that. And
it sort of has a small itch in my brain that he must have been on some obscure team or something, but I don't know if that's just me filling in gaps that aren't there.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll report back, but very, very, like, The Choice, very, very powerful issue here. So that's the month right after Our Worlds at War. And things shift a little bit, I think, at this point. This is the way that I've been thinking about it and the way that I've been talking about it, because Our Worlds at War, the last big crossover, we'll have smaller ones like Return to Krypton 2, Ending Battle, Lost Hearts, but the books from this point forward really do have a lot more autonomy than they had before, and the triangle, or at this point shield numbering, goes away in just a couple more months. It's actually Action 785, which was published in November 2001, as the last issue to bear the shield numbering on the cover. Of course, we'd have instances here and there where they'll be brought back down the line, like during the New Krypton storyline. But this really was the end, with no fanfare, by the way, of the Triangle era. It was just one day, they were gone. So there's more autonomy. We don't have the triangle numbers. We don't have as many of these like big events and whatnot. Now, Joe Kelly will stay on Action Comics until issue 810. And we did a whole episode on his wider run way back in 2021. So if you want to hear a discussion on that, audience, please go check that out. And then similarly, Joe Casey stays on Adventures of Superman until number 623. And we did a whole episode on what I call the forgotten Joe Casey run, which I still stand by. I think we've tried to shine a light on it, but I still feel like it's one of those never collected, mostly not on the app, you know. But we did an episode on that back in December 2022. So that's another one. If you want more of a discussion about what Joe Casey was up to in Adventures, I hope people will check that out. But you and I will zero in on Schultz's final issues of Man of Steel before that title got canceled, and then the final Loeb and McGuinness issues of Superman. So with Superman, like we were talking about off mic, we'll go through those a little bit more issue by issue. But Man of Steel, we can kind of look at them maybe a little bit more big picture. It's funny because when I messaged you, I was like, there's a lot about John Henry Irons. Like it's very Steel-centric, these final issues of Man of Steel. And that's kind of true, but it was not as John Henry Irons specific as I had remembered it. I'm curious what your impressions were.
It felt like a half and half. They definitely have it in mind that Steel is in the title, you know. But yeah, I think they both have some strong moments in here, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's funny because from issues 119 through 134, which is the final issue, there are a number of, like, Jeff Johns does a fill-in, Chuck Austin does a fill-in. We have an issue that's part of Return to Krypton, 2 issues that are part of Ending Battle, 1 issue that's part of Lost Hearts. So there's really there's relatively few just kind of standalone Mark Schultz written issues here. But yes, I mean, if there is any kind of through line, I think it is John Henry Irons who, as we talked about, donned the Entropy Aegis, this armor that Darkseid had created using Apocalypse technology and the armor of Imperiex. And this is what saved his life. But as we see in a number of these issues, there's this dark influence. He can't seem to control himself. He's acting erratically and angrily when he's in the armor. And it all culminates, I know I'm kind of condensing this greatly, but it culminates with him seemingly dying in the final issue of Man of Steel. And then we get that one-shot Superman versus Darkseid Apocalypse Now, where Superman goes to Apocalypse and fights Darkseid and wins the life of John Henry Irons. I mean, how did all of this, focusing on the John Henry Irons piece of it and the armor and all of this, like, how did all of this play for you? I'm curious what your impressions were.
I like this. I liked reading this right after what we just talked about, where we talked about, okay, these 4 issues are about what happens after a war, right? So with that very fresh in mind, these issues worked very well for me, because that put in mind that the Aegis is very much analogous to a nuclear bomb. And what happens, like, if steel represents industry and human progress, that is very interesting to talk about right after a big war, right? So this thing, it seemed like they were writing like this is his PTSD, right? But it's also it's a tool that it kind of saved him, and they needed it at one time, and now they have to deal with it exists, and it existing is a problem. And I really liked, I wrote down the line like, oh, I just think about it and it comes, something like that. And that was very much, it put in mind like, and this is kind of an ironic quote for John Henry Irons, but the quote that's like, oh, if you have just a hammer, it's very tempting to see everything as a nail. That it very much, it felt, thinking about this as a post-war tool was very effective for me.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's not that these issues didn't work for me. Maybe I just wanted more. I wanted even more from his perspective. I don't know, but it definitely, I think it taps into those themes that you're talking about. And you see this tension because to Superman, and look, Superman was the one who initially refused it during our Worlds at War, even though they were in dire straits, but he knew anything that benefits Darkseid can't be a good thing. So he turned it down, and then John Henry Irons accepted, and that ended up playing a critical role. The armor forms the crucible that they use to combine the temporal and spatial displacement energies to transport Warworld back to the Big Bang.
Of course.
As we talked about. So yeah, it was critical in saving. It's all this stuff.
That's impressive that you retained that information. That's honestly impressive.
I mean, it's been, what has it been, a week, I think, less than a week since I recorded that episode. Get a few more weeks and I'll be like, what did they do at the end of that? No, I always remembered taking the planet back to the Big Bang. That has always been cemented in my head. Yeah, as far as the exact mechanics of it, I don't know. But yeah, so it was this critical piece, but Superman represents the danger, and but to Steel, there's a lot of potential here to be explored, and he's a scientific mind. I mean, Superman at one point says, like, if I thought we could destroy it, that's what I would want you to do. But there's that angle too. It's like, what even can you do with this? There are a couple of multi-part storylines. One of them, it runs for 3 issues. It's called Gangs of Metropolis, where you have the Cyber Moths and LexCorp vying for control of the Brainiac 13 nerve center to try to control the technology. And I guess what stands out to me most, and talk about threads that we're kind of picking up here from other stories, we find out that Emil Hamilton, this effing guy, Emil Hamilton was Overmind, the one who was controlling the Cyber Moths. And we didn't spend much time on this in our Worlds at War episode, because it was nebulous as we were reading that issue of Man of Steel where Steel is on the moon and he's injured, and then someone shows up, doesn't want him to spread the word about Warworld being in existence, and delivers the killing blow, but we didn't know who it was. We find out here it was Emil Hamilton. Now he blames it all on the arm, his Brainiac 13 infused cybernetic arm. I don't know. How do you feel about this guy?
We're such like it's a cartoonishly nerd talk that we're doing.
Yeah, that's what we do. No, it's as much as I'm all for justice for Pete Ross. I think I have a new campaign that's like down with Emil Hamilton, and this is not. We know where things are going with Ruin, and people can go listen to that Joe Casey episode where we break it all, or actually the Greg Rucka episode that we did that breaks it all down.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is not the first time for Emil, not the first villainous story, not the last one.
Yes.
So I don't know. I always liked him, but I think that was wrong.
I really like Ruin. So my perspective was, this is kind of a cool, like you said, even though I know that he started as a villain, at least in his first appearance, quasi villain, but this felt like a cool pre-Ruin, and I liked it. I don't know, and I'll say too, to your Down with Emil Hamilton campaign, I don't find him necessary. So I do kind of think it is beneficial for him to be a ally turned corrupted. I think that there is value in that type of character, and he's a good candidate for that type of character. So I don't know. I like this issue. I guess my perspective was, this is cool, but I like Ruin more.
Okay, fair enough. By the way, my tone as I was talking about that, like, I actually don't have any problem with the story. It's more, I'm that invested and I'm like that annoyed at the fictional character of Emil Hamilton. He's always having these villainous turns. It's never his fault. It's like, no, you take some responsibility. Yeah. So his whole thing about, it was the arm. Although I do love when he's like, it was the arm. And Superman's like, all right. And he heat visions it right off. It's like, yes. So I like that we got that payoff to, I mean, even as a kid, I don't think I was losing sleep over who's Overmind, but at least we find out who Overmind was. And at least they put a button on who attacked John Henry Irons up on the Watchtower and was responsible for that. And that actually was a surprise to me, because when I was rereading Our Worlds at War, I assumed it was Lena, because I knew it wasn't Brainiac 13. And I was like, well, who else would it be? Who would know about Warworld and want to keep it a secret? But now, the Emil Hamilton thing made sense. And so at least that, I put a button on that. So I enjoy that aspect of it. As far as other threads, I did want to mention this, because this was something that I was questioning when we were talking about Our Worlds at War. And at a critical juncture in that crossover storyline, it was when the issue of Action Comics where Superman's really disoriented. He can't focus. There's buzzing in his ear. It's his earpiece, but he doesn't know what it is. He's really out of it. And you have Wonder Woman calling for help. This is right when Hippolyta is going to be killed. And you also have Lois calling for help, because this is right when Sam Lane is going to be killed. And Superman finally snaps out of it, and he goes to Wonder Woman. He's still not registering that Lois is calling for him. And I talked about this in Tuesday's episode. I was like, I don't know if that aspect, the fact that he went to Wonder Woman first, if that's ever acknowledged. And it is in a couple of instances. And one of them is in this Pantheon two-parter that we get here, where, long story short, Lois has a brief tenure as the goddess of integrity. She's imbued with these god powers. And she has a conversation with Wonder Woman. And she actually says, she's like, he went to help you instead of me. And Wonder Woman talks about, yes, it was a difficult, terrible choice. It's not like it doesn't become a bone of contention beyond that. But it was acknowledged. And then I'm jumping way ahead, but that Dracula issue of Superman, where Lois is under the thrall of Dracula and she's kind of letting out, I guess, all of these things that she's been bottling up. And she says to Clark, I don't have the exact line, but same sort of thing. Like, you went to Wonder Woman and you didn't come to me in my moment of need. So I just thought it was interesting. And I'm glad that little beat that moment was acknowledged.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you feel like it's undercut that Sam Lane is alive?
I mean, he won't be alive though until New Krypton. So at this point in time, General Rock comes back in one of the final issues of the Loeb and McGuinness run. We find out that Rock was alive this whole time, but Sam Lane, no, he's dead.
Oh, okay.
That's another. I mean, I've been ranting about this too. He comes back in New Krypton. He goes from being a difficult, but ultimately, I think well-meaning, more or less, incarnation in the Triangle era to just mustache twirling villain in New Krypton. And it's like, oh man, I always felt like there was a missed opportunity in just kind of accounting for that shift, but not the hill I'm going to die on. It's all right.
Sure. But yeah, I liked all those issues. Yeah, I didn't reread Our Worlds at War like you just did, but that is interesting. Again, though, it's always like something has to corrupt her for it to be an issue. I do feel like this era suffers from they never really want to have them have a real argument. You know what I mean? There always has to be an outside excuse.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, there are little things. Like there was an issue of Action Comics right after Critical Condition when Lois was investigating who had tried to kill Superman, and he was basically shadowing her. And she was like, you have to let me do this. Like, you can't be on top of me. You have to trust me. I'll be okay. And so like, there are little things like that. And then of course, in the final Loeb issues, we'll finally have the reveal of this deal that she made with Lex, although Clark takes it like exceedingly well.
Yeah.
So like there are little things or little moments. Yeah. I mean, I guess I can't speak for the creators, but like, I do maybe kind of have the sense that I think in terms of how they present the marriage, I mean, I think clearly they were proponents of the two of them. And I think they gave us a lot of great moments. They probably didn't really want to push it that far, or in instances where they did, always had that escape hatch of like, no, it's just a parasite all along.
The escape hatch is a good term.
Yeah. So
I don't know. I guess as an adult now, it's like a weird feeling, and a married guy myself, you know, it's that thing of like, oh, well, drama doesn't end when you're married, which is true, but then they're kind of not willing to fully show it. You know what I mean? And I think they kind of know they can't trust a lot of immature fans to accept that. I don't know. Yeah, that's a bigger conversation, but this era is a big at least they tried, I guess, but
yeah. Like, no, I that your point is well taken. And yeah, I know it is one of those things as a eighth grader and high schooler, you know, reading these at the time, I'm sure I was, this is great. Yeah. Now as a married adult, you kind of like, oh, well, you want to see how that would play out and, you know, and whatnot. But yeah, I think for its time and for its audience, I think they did what they could. I think still within the bounds of presenting this as ultimately a very healthy, supportive, you know, fun, sexy relationship, which it's like, I'm grateful for that because we could have had the Superman 2000 creators who were going to undo all of this, undo the marriage and her knowledge of.
I just listened to your episode talking about it. I wish it happened. I'm pro Superman 2000.
Well, look, so many of those elements popped up in those creators' other stories anyway. You know, we'll take that for what it is. This is so minor, but we read the issue and I might as well mention it. There's issue 120 of Man of Steel with Cave Carson, who comes up to ask Clark for help, where essentially he's been hired by LexCorp for this oil drilling operation, but the oil has this mysterious property mutating or something to that effect. And he wants Clark to write an expose about LexCorp and this oil drilling operation. But instead of handling it as Clark, Superman just tears the place apart. And he talks about through his narration, he's like, I'm so sick of Lex and LexCorp. And he's just like tearing the place apart. But the twist here, which I thought was great, was he confronts Talia, who's running LexCorp at this point, about everything. And after he leaves, she's so frustrated because she set the whole thing up. She wanted LexCorp exposed. Even though she's running the company, she's ultimately working against it. And I love this for two reasons. One, I love the note that the issue ends on where Clark is like, basically, I didn't trust Clark Kent to get the job done. I did this as Superman. And maybe that was a misstep. So I thought that was an interesting idea. But from the Talia point of view, when we get to Public Enemies, which we're talking about in next week's episode, we find out at the end of that story, she's sold off everything. Like she's left Lex with nothing. And I just thought this was, I don't know of any other instances like this in the books. I mean, maybe I'm just blanking on something where you see something this explicit, but I just kind of thought like, oh, that was a nice kind of bit of connective tissue to account for what we get in Public Enemies. So I like that.
Yeah. I like that you pointed out this issue. I love this issue. Like you were saying it, and I'm sure you kind of talked about this more in other episodes, but I love the President Lex era because it feels like the writers are not struggling for what the journalist side should be. I think that's a big problem today, right? That they kind of sweat to think of like, how do we make this a journalist story too? And it used to be a huge part of the books. And yeah, but you're right. It's the book really focuses on, it's a failure that he went in as Superman and not Clark. It was a weakness that he decided to do that. And I love this issue.
Yeah.
And I like Cave Carson. That was cool that he was there.
Yeah. Yeah. There's another thread running through really all of the titles at this point. We're actually going to get the setup for it in an issue of Superman, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it does pop up here a few times in these Schultz issues of Lois taking this trip around the world with her mother as an opportunity for them to finally bond and get to know each other after Sam Lane's death. And one of the things, though, that does pop up in the other books as well, but I think especially here in some of these issues where her mom sees Superman visiting and it gets to the point where she's like, are you having an affair with Superman? And then we ultimately get it's right. Jean comes in and he poses as one of them so that, to divert suspicion, so we have that bit of business going on as well here. And then right at this was the first issue of this batch I didn't mention, but issue 119, which is a Joker's Last Laugh tie-in issue where the Eradicator gets Jokerized. And I just want to mention this because it's, I can't help but laugh at the absurd number of layers placed upon this character, because then we've been talking about this where you've got the original primal Kryptonian programming, then his more evolved version, then the soul of David Connor, then the image of the Phantom Zone Krypton, the Silver Age Krypton that made him go crazy, and now we're adding Joker on top of it. It's like, how much more can this? I can't even call him a person. I mean, this entity. What? It just made me laugh.
It's this whole episode is like. It's like if you were trying to explain physics to a dog. This is so complicated.
It's funny because
I'm just imagining my wife listening to this episode like, what the? I cannot keep up with the continuity here. But yeah, I like this era for Eradicator. I actually really like his look with the tiny yellow triangle and everything. But
yeah.
That was just a fine issue, I think.
Yeah, and then I want to make sure we get to those Superman issues, but real quick, I want to say I love in the final issue of Man of Steel that we get John Bogdanov returning to draw the last few pages, which was a nice touch to bring the Man of Steel title full circle. And then, like I said, we end that with John Henry Irons seemingly killed. But then we have this Apocalypse Now special drawn by Mike McCone, which when we started this run of episodes, we talked about how, of course, he drew the first few issues of Loeb's Superman run because Ed McGuinness wasn't available yet. And I mean, I wouldn't trade Ed McGuinness for anybody, but I was always like, man, Mike McCone, he could have had one of the other books. He was so good. So I was so happy that he got to draw this. And this was badass, man. I mean, I feel like this is kind of this is one that I don't think about this issue very often. And I don't know how often it really comes up for people, but this is not that far removed from some of the Superman Darkseid showdowns that we got in the DC animated universe, where he just really lays a beating on Darkseid.
Oh yeah,
to teach him a lesson. Yeah, I thought it was great.
Yeah, it's awesome, and Darkseid's all he's got the swollen eye and his head's cracked, and I actually noted that he was bald. I've never thought of Darkseid as bald before, but yeah, great fight. There were some good fights with Darkseid in Our Worlds at War too, and it's funny that they kind of returned to that well. But I do always like that. I think there is a Jack Kirby quote that is oh, he's not necessarily stronger than everyone else. He just is kind of hypes himself up a lot. So I think that issue kind of played with that really well. That Superman can beat him, and then it goes to, I won't tell anyone about this if this and such and such. You probably know the deal more than I do. I forget already.
No, that's the gist of it. Yeah, I love, it's so great where Darkseid's you've blinded me, and Superman's your eyes are just swollen. But the other thing that I love between them is Superman's terms are he wants John Henry Irons restored to life. I mean,
Yes.
the long and short of it is that essentially the version of John Henry Irons that was revived during our Worlds at War and placed in the Entropy Aegis is not the full John Henry Irons. I mean, he didn't have his soul. I mean, maybe that's a way to think about it, but he wants the full John Henry Irons restored to life. That's his term. And look, that doesn't compute for Darkseid. He's like, you could be the ruler of Apocalypse.
Yes. He's like, that's really all you're asking for? I thought this was leading to a trick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, which says a lot about Superman.
The one more thing on the Man of Steel issues, because it sounded like you were unsure, like, does it feel like John Henry's soul is missing? And also, for that matter, does it feel like the Aegis is that powerful and actually affecting anything? You know what I mean?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's the intention. Right? I mean,
right.
But I don't know how.
Sounds, what I'm getting at it sounds like a lot of they're saying these things are happening. They're saying that the Aegis is super powerful, but they never really showed me.
Yes.
I don't know. Even though I do like this story, but looking at the whole thing, I never felt like the Aegis was any more powerful than the average Lex Luthor suit.
Yeah, I think there was some, and look, in fairness, like I said, we had multiple fill-ins and crossovers going on. There was a lack of artistic consistency. Yvel Gaucher did a number of issues. Darryl Banks did some issues, and in and of themselves, fine. But I do generally like a consistent, steady hand from issue to issue, and we didn't have that. So yeah, I don't know. I think the focus was a little off. Like I said, I definitely remember this as being far more John Henry Irons focused, and he's there, and there's enough, but I definitely would have wanted more on that front.
I think there's good emotion with John Henry Irons, but it's still a Superman book because he solves all the problems, right? And John Henry just kind of is along for the ride. And I don't know how how much that works for a John Henry story. I thought it was pretty good, but
yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. So all these issues, these Man of Steel issues that we just talked about, not collected, except there's like that Apocalypse Now special is collected in a Superman versus Darkseid trade.
Mm-hmm.
Issue
That's how I read it.
Yeah. Issue 122 is in the Steel 30 year celebration hardcover, but all the rest of it, not collected, basically MIA from the app. I had to resort to the means that we have to resort to when it comes to it, when stuff is not available. Like, I'd be hard pressed to say to people, you gotta like hunt these down, go to the back issue bins. Like, you gotta get these issues. You know, if what we're saying really kind of speaks to you, or you're really intrigued by this chapter in Steel's history, it's worth checking out. But yeah, for me, it didn't totally come together, but I'm glad. See, here's the thing. My initial plan was to really just kind of run through Our Worlds at War aftermath in our Worlds at War episode. I'm like, all right, we'll do the big crossover and we'll just kind of talk about what happened after. And then I was like, you know what? When the hell else are you going to go through these issues again and like actually read them in full and talk about them? So just do it. And so I'm glad we're doing this episode. I'm glad that I finally sat down for the first time since they came out and read these Man of Steel issues again, even if my mileage was pretty limited in terms of what I got out of them. So shall we shift over to Superman?
Sure.
All right. Now these issues, I don't know, maybe we had sort of opposite reactions to these couple of runs that we looked at, but for me, here's the thing. I feel like historically I've looked at Loeb's final stretch of Superman issues as not being especially strong. Yeah. And in fairness, if we're looking at the run as a whole, I don't know that I would put many, if any of these in my top 10 or whatever. Although I do think that final 2-part story in particular is strong and brings everything full circle in an effective way. But overall, all that being said, I thought that this stretch was a lot better than I remembered it being. Like, I had a lot more fun with these issues because going into it, I'm like, oh, okay, it was a little bit kind of not totally here or there in those final 8 months, but I liked them a lot more than I thought I was going to.
There's high points and low points for sure. Yeah. Are we going to go issue by issue, or should we talk as a whole?
I mean, like I said, we don't have to go page by page or anything, but yeah, we can kind of go one by one, and we'll just kind of hit on the main points. But 175, this is the 100 issue anniversary of Superman 75, and in story, they don't put a year amount on it, but it's the anniversary of Superman's death at the hands of Doomsday. And the quote unquote narration in this issue is Lex's post-war State of the Union address. And this is the part that I mean, it's relatively minor and it's only a small part of the issue, but it's like part of Joker's last laugh. It's like, I wish we could have just skipped that, but it's fine.
I got a lot more Joker in this assignment than I thought I was going to get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing I'll say, this is a side note, but I think an important one tying back to an earlier episode. The only thing about the Superman books tying into Joker's last laugh, just like all the DC books did that month, that is intriguing to me is the fact that Superman has been through Emperor Joker.
Yeah.
And in most of these tie-in issues, not this one, I don't think, but in the other ones, there's this refrain from him of like, it's happening again, right? Like, cause he's been through this, you know? So that aspect of it I thought was intriguing, but otherwise it's like, I could have done without the tie-in aspect.
Yeah. It's weird. And he's still dealing with aftermath of Emperor Joker with like remnants from that world or whatever. So it is weird. It's like, okay, wait, there's a separate one, but we're also talking about this very similar situation. I don't know. It was strange, but easy to ignore. I found when I was just focusing on what you assigned me. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And so in this issue, we get another showdown between Superman and Doomsday. Doomsday had seemingly been killed during our Worlds at War, seemingly vaporized by Imperiex, but it turns out he's still alive. Skipping all the way to the end, we find out that the alliance between Earth and Apocalypse continues, and we have this clandestine meeting between Lex and Darkseid, where Lex hands over the body of the body of Doomsday to Darkseid. And there's also a line about how Darkseid was instrumental in the recovering and repair of the Beast, and that Doomsday's release was planned, and it was meant to be a test to show that the Beast is still in working order. All that to say, my question to you is, at the beginning of the issue, we have Joker sneaking into the Pentagon and seemingly injecting his Joker gas into Doomsday's chamber.
Yes.
Which like, it seems to wake him up, but correct me if I'm wrong, Doomsday is not Jokerized like all the other villains and all the other tie-ins.
I do think he is supposed to be.
Yeah?
Just based on he's smiling. I think you're supposed to feel that when you get that splash page of his mask ripped away in his face.
Okay.
I think you're supposed to notice that he's laughing. Okay. I guess. I don't know. It's just that he has a weirder face, I guess. But like I said, I kind of like that it's the Joker stuff is easy to ignore. I do just think of this issue as a fantastic, straight up Superman versus Doomsday fight.
Yeah, it was, I mean, and my God, to have Ed McGuinness draw this battle.
So good.
Oh, it was so fun. And Doomsday has evolved. I mean, this is a major development, at least for this moment in time here, where he's gained sentience. He's able to speak and think. And that's ultimately critical to Superman's defeat of him, and which Superman articulates to Doomsday. He's like, before you didn't even feel pain. You couldn't think, you couldn't speak, but now you know what that pain is like. And that leads to fear. And as he's saying this, like the Doomsday is punching him and the bones are just like breaking against Superman. And he's like, you'll never kill me again. Which I thought was a nice way to end the Doomsday story. The Doomsday. This is forever the tension that I feel. And Death of Superman got me into this. It means the world to me. But I'm not one who's ever like, oh yeah, we got to keep bringing Doomsday back. I feel like law of diminishing returns with this character. And this was actually an instance though, where I felt like, okay, that's actually a nice kind of period to put at the end of Doomsday. Like he's evolved past the point of him really being a threat. But of course the character will continue.
Yeah. I like Doom. I think I like Doomsday more than most, but I definitely get overusing for sure.
Yeah.
I really like the focus of the evolving aspect of Doomsday is why I think he can keep coming back. I can't say anybody's done it too interesting, because I don't think getting smarter is the interesting part. But
yeah. I mean, I will say I'm a little bit behind as of this recording. I'm a little bit behind on the current Superman title, but all this business with him being the time travel.
Yeah, I don't really like it.
All right. I mean, what I had read of it, and like I said, I'm a little bit, a couple issues behind, but I that at least was very distinct. And it's like, all right, at least we're finding a new angle here. So that's another one. I'll report back. We'll do an episode when that's all done. But the other two things here that I really enjoyed is that Mac, Lex's assistant, finally stands revealed as Martian Manhunter. And I just love that Lex knew the whole time. Like, Doomsday's attacking and he's chastising Mac. He's like, come on, what are you doing? Like, we need you. And he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, you have the worst attendance record of any assistant ever. Why do you think I let you stay? And then he reveals himself as Manhunter, the spy that Justice League sent in, which I just love that Lex knew.
Yeah.
And then Pa returns. Pa sees the news footage of the battle, and this kind of snaps him out of the state that he's been in, at least to an extent. And he makes his way home, and we get this reunion, and just the final page or the final scene between Clark and Pa out in the field with the sunset. Oh, it was beautiful. I love it. I'm there for that. So anything else on that one?
No, great issue. I shallowly, I do just think of this as like, this is a great action sequence, but
yeah, the action's great. And especially as we get like really into the battle, and I assume this was conscious, we do get that decreasing panel per page model, just like the original storyline, which was a nice touch. I wonder if this was something where Loeb and or McGuinness were like, hey, it's the 100 issues. Like we want to do a Doomsday story. Or if DC was like, hey, it's 100 issues, do a Doomsday story. Like it played great either way, but I would wonder about that. All right. So issue 176, this has Ian Churchill on the art duties filling in for McGuinness. And this is where Superman is in therapy. He begins seeing Dr. Claire Foster, who Martian Manhunter referred him to. And we get the therapy session that comprises the issue here. He talks about these nightmares he's been having about killing the General Zod of Pakolasan. He talks about Aquaman, who's missing, presumed dead after our world's at war, and talks about kind of these early encounters that they had and how they're more alike than people would think, sort of both being fish out of water, so to speak. He talks about his parents, talks about, quote unquote, Jane, the woman in his life who, they take care of each other. And he talks about how he has to protect his secret identity with the doctor. And so that's why he comes up with this name. And it's also in this issue where Lois talks about wanting to go on this trip around the world with her mother. I mean, what do you make of this bit about him in therapy? Because I think this was a very I wish I remembered what if any reaction there was to this at the time on message boards or whatnot. Like I was just not plugged in that way at that time. But it's intriguing. I'm curious what you thought of this.
Are you getting into, because you feel like it was still a time where therapy was still pretty stigmatized?
Maybe, I mean, like even in this issue, like even Superman is like, I don't know how inspirational it would be if people found out I was here.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like it was not the attitude that it is now about it.
It's almost like it's a whole, it would almost be considered like cliche if you did this issue now. But I really like this issue. I do think Claire Foster is a great character. I wish that they would like bring that character back. I really liked, I talked about this kind of on my first episode, but rereading things post becoming a dad is very interesting to me. I wrote down the line, like, when she says, like, you're taking, this is a little tropey now, but like, you're taking care of everyone, like who takes care of you, is a little bit, it's interesting to me, because there is a level of like, just thinking about me with my kids, is you do try to struggle with the balance of like, you don't want to bottle things up, but you also now know you can't lose it in front of your kids, and you do have to appear a certain way. And that's like, oh, that's what that Superman theme has been talking about for years and years and years. So I like this issue a lot. Yeah,
me too. It's one of those things. What I need to see him in a therapy session issue after issue? No, but the fact that that's something that he's participating in, it makes sense. I mean, like, especially given his life and even more so coming off of this war that he's been through, the notion that he would need to talk to somebody in that capacity, it rings true. It rings true. I mean, I don't know. And we don't get a ton more with Claire Foster. I know there's an issue of Action Comics by Joe Kelly where I think also they're talking about Zod. I think he talks about how he killed the Zod of the Pocket Universe.
Yeah.
And then there's is it the issue with Muhammad X where he talks to her again? Or am I making that up?
I think you're right.
But all that to say, only a few instances, right? Like, it's not like she becomes a regular fixture in the books. And I don't know how much space there is for that. I mean, I guess depending on the story, there's a way to kind of fit it in. But just the notion that he's engaging in this, I really did think it was interesting. I liked it.
Yeah.
All right. Issue 177, our Metropolis mailbag. So tradition in the books, right, of the Metropolis mailbag, Christmas time, Superman answers these letters. We have a 21st century update here now where we're in email territory, although he misses the physical letters and Jimmy's like, you could print them out. But sort of the dual tracks of this. I like that. This was a fun issue. This was one, like, I don't really remember it particularly fondly, but rereading it, I'm like, oh, it's kind of cool. Cause we go back and forth between these messages that he's answering. He's helping all of these people, installing a bell in a church that's just been rebuilt after the war in this small South American village, things like that. It juxtaposed with this battle that he has to keep getting involved in between Metallo and the new toy man, Hiro Nakamura, who claims his grandfather is the inventor of the alloy that Metallo is made out of, and he's trying to reclaim it. And so he's in this Megazord type suit. Big Power Rangers fan here. And we have the two of them battling. And so Superman keeps getting pulled back and forth. So overall, like, I thought it was fun. And there is one important bit of business here at the end of the issue when Superman reunites with Lois, who's still on her trip. She's starting to put some of the pieces of our worlds at war together. And specifically this notion that Lex pulled her to the White House from the space arc where she was in outer space, like right before her father died. And it starts to click of like, it's almost like he knew what was going to happen. And that thread will play, but that's an important bit of business here. But yeah, what stood out to you about this one?
Yeah, just was this the first appearance of the new Toy Man? Did you look that up?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's what stuck out to me. I like this character. He's a I don't know. I like villain Toy Man because I just like villains a lot. But he's a fun character. It's always a fun bit when you see the little Superman action figures and someone's pointing up at this guy like, look, it's many birds.
Yeah.
All the highlights to me were just, it's fun to see big toys.
Yeah, it was fun. And talking about setup for Public Enemies, Hero plays a big role in the climax of Public Enemies and creating that giant Superman Batman composite robot that Captain Atom pilots to destroy the asteroid. And so this is, like I said, just kind of putting some pieces into play. So it was nice to see his introduction again. So yeah, got a lot more mileage out of that. And then issue 178 is our Uncle Sam issue. So it opens in Smallville, and I love, we got this great 2-page spread, Ed McGuinness issue. And there's a little note after TS, after Tim Sale, because it's the main street of Smallville, right out of For All Seasons. And in a nod to the pre-crisis roots of Jonathan and Martha, we have them taking over the general store and reopening it, which I thought was cool. And Superman's there for the opening, trying to decide what kind of pie he wants. And I love how you have, like, Lex sees this online and he's reading it on supermanhomepage.com, which was a nice nod to the real life website. But he's very disturbed by the fact that Superman is at the same general store where Lex had announced that Pete Ross was going to be the nominee for vice president. And I love when he calls Pete in and Pete's like, what's the big deal? We're all on the same team.
Yeah.
He's like, Pete, you dumbass.
That's another issue. I was like, oh, Pete's really not getting any love in this run, but
it's par for the course for poor Pete. But then Uncle Sam shows up and decks Superman and starts spouting off these lines about your codes, your alien codes of non-interference. and whatnot. And Superman's down on the ground, and Uncle Sam goes to hit him again, and Superman stops it. And he's like, "You don't hit a man when he's down." And Uncle Sam knows that, and like kind of snaps him out of it. What was your read on like what triggered this in Uncle Sam? Like that the spirit of America itself has been corrupted, and that's what's fueling him?
Yes. I mean, can we get into it, into what it was and everything?
Yeah.
I did really like that. So it turns out to be, did I understand this right? It's because Lex is president?
Yeah. I mean, I guess, what was interesting about this is that they really didn't beat you over the head with the explanation. Right. So I think it's a little bit open to interpretation. I mean, Superman does say to him, because he takes Uncle Sam to Topeka, which of course was the site of ImperieX's first strike, and hundreds of thousands of people lost. And they continue their conversation. They end up on the Statue of Liberty. And he does say, he's like, alien code of non-interference. That's not you. That's Lex Luthor speaking.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know how literally I don't know. Because he talks about, go ahead.
Well, then he kind of snaps him out of it by saying, the president of the United States does not represent all of us, which great.
Great whip.
So this, yes. So this was a very interesting issue to me then. So this is now, we talked about bananas coincidence, the whole Two Towers thing. So now at this point, we're writing post that event.
Yeah.
You think?
Well, yeah, because he specifically mentions the World Trade Center, and this is enough months down the line where this would be reflected. Because when he has this whole thing, basically Superman's speeches to Uncle Sam is about how the country can come together after these times of tragedy. But he says, "I wish we didn't have to keep learning these same lessons." But he cites, he talks about our worlds at war, which of course in the DC universe, that's this big event that they're just coming out of. But then, he does mention the World Trade Center and at least one other instance of a terrorist attack. And so, this was, I do remember, like, it's been so many years, man. Like I do have a memory of like at the time clocking the fact that, they're directly referencing this because I'd have to double check the dates of when like Amazing Spider-Man 36 with the black cover, when that came out versus this. And obviously there were various tribute comics that were coming out, but as far as just kind of a mention, right? Like this felt pretty momentous. And certainly in the Superman books, it was.
Yeah. So now it's interesting that, so like I said, so I was 7 or 8 at this point. So more than me.
Just keep reminding me how much younger you are. That's fine. That's fine. Most of the guests who are on here were the same age, or they have a few years on me. I don't like this. I don't like this reversal.
So I'm just gonna stretch, and none of my bones are gonna crack real quick, and then. So now it's interesting because now we get to talk about the layer of how Superman reflects culture, and this is now the Freedom Fries era, where it's like, you do not say anything bad about America. We're in ultra patriot mode. So it's very interesting to see, like, I don't think they would have done the President Lex storyline post 9/11, right? Because they just was like, hey, you just don't criticize the country at all. So it's interesting that now having President Lex kind of made this issue age better. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the I don't know. So it made it take on an attitude of like, no, this is what America is, not the ideas of Lex, which is where, we're heading, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I feel like over the years I've never quite known what to make of this issue. And and because they don't totally spell it out. But I guess my reading of it is because he, like, this character, this superhero Uncle Sam, is the embodiment of the spirit. And I guess I don't know where the line is between it's fully the Lex influence versus just the weight of the tragedy, but just kind of, I think all of it kind of coming together is is having this effect, but Superman's able to snap him out of it. Yeah.
Which is kind of an interesting commentary of like, oh, that's the time where that's most malleable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of Lex, he got some important information here. He's got this little clerk who comes in with all of this satellite imagery from decades ago. And Lex comes out of this issue knowing Clark Kent is Superman because he has these images of a Kryptonian spacecraft landing on the Kent farm between 25 and 30 years ago. Now, we talked about this when we did Ending Battle, I guess, but
I heard.
All right. So we went through this whole bit where Manchester Black is behind this, and he'll ultimately erase Lex's memory of knowing that Clark Kent is Superman. But for a brief period, we had this. That was a big, I remember that though. I remember that last page of Clark Kent as Superman. I remember being like, oh my God, like, what are they going to do? And then it's like, well, not really much in the end.
Yeah. So I guess it was just so that he is the red herring in a future story.
Yeah.
I guess it's just plausible that he did Ending Battle then, but yeah, nothing really happens.
That he did Ending Battle. I like that. That's a good way of putting it. All right. And then, issue 179.
Okay.
Real quick. So issues 179 and 180, it's the Muhammad X issue and then the Dracula issue. And both are co-plotted by Geoff Johns, scripted by Jeph Loeb, but both co-plotted by Geoff Johns. If memory serves, I think they shared a studio at this point in time. So they're working relationship, which is interesting to me that these two issues that I think are arguably the biggest outliers of all of these had the Geoff Johns hand in it, but they feel like outliers even for Geoff Johns. So I don't know.
Yeah.
What's in the water over there? But the Muhammad X issue, yeah. So there's this black superhero who Superman encounters in Harlem, who really takes Superman to task. I mean, the gist of it initially seems to be like, why are you here? You're never here before because, basically you don't pay us any mind because we don't have alien invasions or whatnot. But then it really shifts, or this is my reading of it, it shifts more into he's doing a harm by being there because the population there should be looking up to a hero like Muhammad X, not Superman. And this really throws Superman, and he has all these conversations with Martian Manhunter, for example, and with Lois.
Natasha.
I've never quite known where to land on this one. What was your take on this?
Not good. So this issue is the elephant in the room, I think. Especially, so the take of this issue is, hey, just don't see color. I think so now it would be written differently because it is the classic, like, I don't care if you're black, white, green, purple, that whole thing, which essentially, and then there's a line in here that says, like, he literally says, I wonder if being colorblind just makes you blind.
I'm glad you said that because as you were saying the first part, I was like, oh, we have that line. Yeah.
We have that one line. The issue is that the whole I don't care what color you are. Like, that has essentially been the men of a certain age, their phrase for just shut up about your race. I don't want to hear it. And that is essentially where this issue lands. This is the one that obviously does not age well to me. And it came before a time of saying, like, hey, maybe you guys should not be writing this.
Yeah. Overall, it does, through a 2025 lens, yes, it feels ill-advised.
Yeah.
But even in the context of the time, it like I said, it felt like an outlier, and it wasn't. I remember I didn't double check for this recording, but I feel like the last time I looked at this issue, if memory serves, like, Muhammad X never appears anywhere else. I mean, this is not something that's then further explained. It just felt. We also have a guest artist on this, Ariel Olivetti. It just felt like it just kind of felt out of place in a number of ways, I suppose. I mean, I guess to give the benefit of the doubt, I mean, the fact that they were interested in exploring this.
Yeah.
Something to be said for that. That's
kind of how I feel too. But there's, it's kind of like that infamous, like, Lois Lane issue where she turns black for an issue. which if you do read it, it's like, okay, they are trying. Now, was that the person to write the issue? And does that come up with problems? Yes. This one, I don't even think lands in a, I don't know. Like the lowest issue, the visuals are wrong, but maybe they're saying something, at least what was at the time considered correct. But this one I just think is no good.
Yeah. I mean, I guess to be perfectly honest, I've just never liked this issue. I've never really felt like it was a particularly strong one.
It's not, yeah.
And then when you layer on top of that, yes, kind of the message and who it's coming from. And I think this is one that if we were putting together a trade paperback of this,
yeah,
this
go ahead and leave this one out.
I would focus on the Ed McGuinness issues. This one could kind of fall away.
I will say what is interesting to me about this issue is when you bring up like, oh, did Muhammad X even appear before? I do actually kind of like the angle of when Superman asked Natasha about it, and he's like, have you ever heard of this guy? And she's like, you ever hear of Batman? And she kind of lists this like, no, there's this whole other side that you don't even know about. That's kind of interesting. But yeah.
Yeah, this one was not. This was not a particular.
It's the black spot of the run.
Yeah, I'd be curious if there are any. I mean, I feel like this is. And by the way, we're at the point now where these issues have never been collected. A number of these later ones are available on the app in the form of an issue or issues of DC Comics Presents Superman, but the actual standalone individual issues are missing from the app. I feel like this is probably a pretty overlooked portion of the run. Like, I'd be curious if there's anyone who's like, no, like I really stand by this issue and I got something out of it. Like, I would be curious, but yeah, that's one that not particularly a fan of. On the other hand, so it's funny when I did the Action 775 episode with Chris Clow as we were wrapping up, he's like, oh, I can't wait till you get to the Dracula or do an episode on the Dracula issue. I'm like, I would never do an episode on that because I historically really was not a fan of this issue, but I was like, you know what? I'm kind of on board with it. Ian Churchill on art. And we have Lois, Clark, and Jimmy going to the Count's house in Eastern Europe for an interview. And it's Dracula. And we have this whole sequence at night where Lois is under his thrall and she's walking through the mud. And then Superman intervenes. And it turns out all of this whole story side of things, although the Count actually did want to get his country's story out there because you have Pakistan breathing down their necks and they are trying to get press about their plight. But more importantly, he wanted to lure Superman there to drain him, to make him one of his minions. And it all builds to Dracula taking a bite out of Superman's neck and like disintegrating because Superman is a solar battery. So
he just drank sun juice. Yeah.
Yeah. So vampires' weakness is this, and he's all sunlight inside. So it was interesting and a fun payoff to this. I thought.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's what I was going to say. It's like, oh, this is like my fun fact issue that I tell people. Is like, oh, you know what happens when a vampire bites Superman? This. So, but yeah, this is a nice, I skim through this every October.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that too, where this is one of those ones, like I keep using this term outliers, but this is one of those ones. If I were putting together a trade paperback and DC said, you only have space for X number of issues and I had to cut, I don't know that this would make the cut if I was really trying to put together as kind of cohesive a narrative issue to issue as possible. But you're right. I mean, this is something that come October time might be just kind of a fun, spooky read of our Daily Planet crew going up against Dracula. It was fun. Great Ian Churchill art on this as well. All right, we're barreling towards the end here. Issue 181 is a Bizarro issue where we don't find this part out until the end, but Manchester Black has used his abilities to have Clark and Bizarro switch bodies and chaos ensues. So, of course, Clark wakes up in Bizarro's body in the graveyard of Solitude, right? Is that what he calls it? In the cemetery.
Yeah.
And of course, Bizarro in Clark's body wakes up in Lois and Clark's apartment and then flies through the glass window and goes to the Daily Planet and everything. I don't know. I think this was a fun one. I've really come around on this Bizarro and the backwards speak, and I love Ed McGuinness drawing it. And I don't know. I just thought this was kind of a fun one-off.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Ed McGuinness is a top tier Bizarro artist. For sure, there's some great pages in here, particularly like when he's fighting the Justice League in Bizarro body. Gorgeous page. Just that's what you want out of a Bizarro issue, in my opinion. It's just a one-off palate cleanser type story. Yeah. Freaky Friday one shot is always kind of just fun.
The one, I guess, kind of quote unquote important piece of this is that when they're battling, Superman does get a glimpse into Bizarro's memories and sees that he's been beaten by General Zod. And we had known, I think we had seen this in pages of Action Comics, that Zod was using him, right, as his punching bag to train for his battle with Superman. So Superman got a little bit of a glimpse into that, which was interesting. And then you also have John Jones once again posing as Superman to divert suspicion, because this raises the question, like, why would Bizarro in seemingly human form dress up as Clark? So they're able to throw off suspicion. All right, and then finally, issues 182 and 183, a two-part storyline called The Secret that brings the Jeph Loeb run on the title full circle, right back to the beginning here. It breaks my heart that issue 183 is not collected anywhere, including in those DC Comics Presents Superman issues. Not collected, not on the app, just only MIA. It's a very critical issue, or a critical two-parter overall. Before I give kind of my rundown of the main plot points and whatnot, let me toss it to you. I mean, what was your reaction to The Secret?
I don't know if I can say like I quite understand the motive here, or the strategy behind Perry White's plan.
Okay, fair. So
okay,
that's fair. I think that's
and
fair.
Why does it have to be kept from Lois? And
yeah, okay.
I don't know.
So a lot of things.
Break that down for me.
So a lot of things come to a head here, right? We started the Jeph Loeb tenure on the title with this secret pact she made with Lex Luthor that he would sell the planet back to Perry White for $1, and in exchange, she would kill one story of Lex's choosing. And that had been hanging over her all this time. It really wasn't mentioned that much as we got deeper into the Loeb Kelly era, but certainly in the beginning, it came up a lot. And as I mentioned, in one of these earlier issues, we have Lois starting to put together that maybe Lex had advanced knowledge of who was going to die in our worlds at war. And so in The Secret here, this final two-parter of the Loeb run with McGuinness on art, we get Lois pursuing this story. And the opening sequence is that she's been targeted by the Suicide Squad. So Solomon Grundy throws her off the roof. Icicle rescues her. Was it Icicle or Killer? No, Killer Frost, right?
Yeah.
Killer Frost rescues her, but then puts her in the path of an oncoming train. Superman saves her. Then there's a bullet from Deadshot that comes her way. But had Superman not been there, the bullet would have stopped the train. So it would have killed the people on the train, but it would have saved Lois, because it was not just a bullet, but a bomb. All to say that someone is trying to scare Lois. They're not actually trying to kill her per se, but they're trying to scare her, get her to back down from the story. She does have a secret source, a deep throat, so to speak, and it's actually Hope of Hope and Mercy fame, who is tired of being the other one, right? Because everybody knows Mercy, but they don't know Hope. And so she confirms Lois's suspicions about Lex having this advanced knowledge. And it's at this point, I guess Lois is deep enough into this where Lex shows up in the apartment and calls in his marker, as he says. And he's like, this is the story you're going to kill. And he's like, and by the way, of course I knew. And I did what I had to do. And Lois has been narrating the entire issue, but we find out her narration is her confession to Clark. So at the end of the issue, she reveals to Clark that she made this secret deal. And as I was saying earlier, like Clark takes it pretty well. He's like, that was what you did was selfish and self-serving, but also the most courageous thing I've ever seen anyone do. It's like, all right, which I don't know well, maybe this speaks to your point, right? Where this could have been, and arguably should have been, not that he needs to be enraged at her and they're on the verge of divorce or anything like that, but maybe there could have been a little bit more there, especially since like that was such a big deal at the outset of all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Make them see both sides a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah. But Clark's fix is, okay, you can run the story, but I can. We'll use a loophole. He's like, when you're dealing with the devil, you got to use whatever you can. And so he goes to Perry, and Perry runs the story. And so it ends with Luther holding the news, but Luther knew. Luther had advanced knowledge of the deaths in Topeka, Kansas. And then in the next issue, Lex instantly denies everything, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to stop my recap here for a moment. And this, if there's a problem that I have with this, what proof did Lois/Clark have before the story ran? Because it doesn't seem like they really had, like, it's just never really specified, because Hope, it's not like Hope goes on the record. I mean, I guess just an anonymous source, but like they didn't have any hard evidence, because when we get to the end of this story, when essentially the Daily Planet has been discredited, because, well, I'll talk about what Lex does, but I think Perry says to Clark, it's like, do you have evidence? And Clark's like, no, not yet. It's like, well, but what was the base?
We're going to go ahead anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so like, that's what kind of bugs me. It's like, why would Perry have run that story in the first place?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Okay. So I wasn't missing it.
No, I mean, and look, this might be the sort of thing where they're only going to go so deep into the journalism side of it.
Yes,
but I feel like
yes.
there could have been something.
Yeah. And then, okay. So then Clark gets fired.
Well, at the end, because so at the start of part 2, right? Lex is just denying this, and he says, "I can't believe I've known Perry White. They grew up together in this post-crisis where he's like, I've known Perry. I can't believe he would do this." And we all know the person who wrote the story, i.e., Clark, has had a personal grudge against me. So Lex agrees to have the Justice League show up on the White House lawn and have Martian Manhunter probe his mind to determine whether or not Lex actually knew. And of course, this is all a very calculated plot by Lex, and the Justice League falls right into it, because they go and Martian Manhunter probes his mind, and he confesses telepathically to Clark and the rest of the League. He's like, Lex believes he's telling the truth. That he believes that he didn't have advanced knowledge. And Clark's like, no, he confessed to Lois. He's like, he has no memory of that either. But by the way, he really does love Lois. He's like, which is something we've been talking about in these episodes. So I thought that was interesting. And then I do love where Wonder Woman's like, I'm going to use the lasso, and Batman steps in. He's like, no, like clearly he has a way to beat this. This would just be further playing into his hands.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, Lex really just kind of is able to beat this lie detector test. I mean, we find out later in subsequent stories, right? It was Manchester Black, a powerful telepath who was able to allow Lex to get away with this. But as a result of this, the Daily Planet has to print a retraction, and Perry fires Clark. And there is that little moment where he's like, do you have anything to back this up? And Clark's like, no, not yet. But my point is, it's like, why are you asking this now? This is what's going on here? What kind of operation are you running? And Lois and Clark, they have a nice moment on the roof at the end, and they embrace. And it seems like that's the end. It seems like Clark's lost his job, and that's it. But then we get an epilogue where Superman shows up at the Daily Planet, which, by the way, I love the full circle moment here, because Loeb's first issue started with Superman retrieving the discarded Daily Planet globe from the trash heap, the junkyard, and flying it to the roof and having this rooftop rendezvous with Perry White. And that's how the entire run ends.
All right. Yeah. Okay. That is nice.
Which is a nice
I didn't
touch.
get that context. Yeah.
Which was a nice touch. And the story is called -30-, which was part of Lois's narration in one of Loeb's first issues about how that's what comes at the very end to let the print setters know that it's the end of the story. So there were some nice callbacks here. But yeah, Superman shows up and has this conversation with Perry. It turns out Clark's firing was a ruse. Clark's going to continue to work undercover to take down Lex. And only Perry, Superman, and Clark can know this. No one else can know.
This is where I'm getting at. I don't get that at all.
I don't really either, other than
okay.
It's like it creates some tension. And over the years, one of the things I've complained about, one of my many complaints, is like, this is such an interesting setup. Clark's going to be undercover trying to take down President Lex. This is great. And it's rarely followed up on how, in fairness, there are a few instances. Actually, in the final issue of Man of Steel, where it opens with Clark and Perry having that walk together in Centennial Park, and Clark's confessing. He's like, Lois is onto me. She found my room where I have all of my life stuff. She thinks I'm going
I look
crazy.
Yeah.
So there was that. there was at least one issue of Joe Casey's Adventures run where I think Clark is undercover. There's an issue of the Stephen T. Siegel Superman run that's coming up right after this where Hope is imprisoned in LexCorp and Clark goes in. So there are a few instances, but it's not a driving force, and it never ends up being anything that takes Lex down. I mean, as we talk about in next week's episode, it's like Lex just freaking loses it, and that's the end of it for him.
Yeah. Does that feel like like a disadvantage of kind of the triangle philosophy where it's like, well, one writer had an idea of something where to go, and then the other writers just kind of maybe don't have the passion for that idea, and they just kind of let it flutter, I guess, you know?
Maybe. I mean, I think it's one of those things, if whether it was one of the writers or multiple writers or the editor, like if someone had, I think there needed to be pieces of a puzzle that each title could kind of work on. Like if there had been some, and I don't have something off the top of my head, but some information, some revelation, something about Lex, and you know, you kind of see Clark put together one piece of it in one title and another piece in another, something like that. And then it actually builds to something. But I don't think they ever really had any kind of end game for this. And so it really doesn't get much play. And then I personally, and if anyone disagrees, like, please let me know, but I don't feel like it ever really comes together in a meaningful way, because then we get to Public Enemies and we know how that plays out.
Yeah.
Fun story, but it's just like, oh, okay. Yeah. Like Lex just was crazy.
Yeah. I think that is a common complaint, that it's easily swept away when he just like, oh, okay. Everyone saw him go crazy. All right. That's over.
Yeah. So I don't know. I guess I'm kind of torn because I look at this two-parter, The Secret, and I really do feel like if we're strictly looking at Loeb Kelly era and Loeb's run on Superman, I think it is a nice and effective conclusion and a full circle moment for that run. And it ends on this really intriguing notion of Clark working undercover, but it's undercut by the fact that it's never really capitalized on to the extent that it could be. So in a vacuum, great. In larger context, I don't know.
Yeah. And I didn't understand. It just confused me overall. Because especially when that issue where it's like, Lois saw my wall. She thinks I'm crazy. Like, why? I didn't understand why they were keeping it from Lois.
I'm with you. Like, I guess I get why Perry would want this circle to be as tight as possible. I can buy that well enough. But I don't understand why, other than for dramatic storytelling purposes,
right?
Why Clark would not share this with Lois, and why he would let her think he's unemployed and he's trying to find a job and he's got this secret Lex murder room.
That was board. that whole sort of sequence where of him pretending to be jobless was just came off as strange to me. Didn't quite click.
Yeah. And that's where we've been talking about that the books have more autonomy now and the triangle numbers are gone and all of that. But you know what, in fairness, they're not totally in their own silos. Things like Lois's trip and her mother's suspicion about her having an affair with Superman, those pop up in multiple books. So there is still coordination, to be clear, but that's the sort of thing where if this had been the 90s triangle era, I don't think I think it would have been a kind of a tighter, a tighter rein on it. And I think you would have had more of these building blocks coming together. Like, I don't think I think this just sort of felt a little bit more haphazard. Like, oh, you do this, you'll do that. But like I said, I just don't know that there was ever a firm plan for where we go. Or I have no idea. I mean, maybe there was going to be more of an angle to Clark's undercover reporting, but then Public Enemies just came and swept in the plan.
Someone should have just been like, hey, we got to wrap this up.
Yeah. So I don't know, but like that last two-parter, especially because it's not in a trade paperback and you can only find one of the issues on the app if you go to a DC Comics Presented. I feel like people probably have not read it. And I would just say that even if you have to resort to scans, which I'm generally not an advocate of, but if there's no other reasonable recourse, we do what we have to do. But if you haven't read it and you've read the other parts of the Loeb Kelly era, or you've been enjoying our conversations, if you want to check it out, check it out. It's a satisfying in and of itself 2-part finale.
Yes. Yeah, I do recommend just doing this whole pick a writer and read them in order. sort of thing. That's kind of what I like to do, and that's how you discover some fun stuff that way. Yeah.
Is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to talk about before we sign off?
No.
Fair
I'm just
enough.
looking at my notes. Sorry.
Fair.
No, I think we did okay.
I mean, listen, I appreciate you coming back. I know this was, again, sort of an odd bunch of issues because we're after an event and we're focusing on a couple of titles, but for my personal fan journey and our overall podcast coverage, I wanted to do this, and I'm glad we did. And it was great to have you. This was a lot of fun.
I like the bunch that I got. It was a lot of interesting stuff. And I'll say, I had a long day at work, and it's a delight talking to you. It's a real bright spot.
Oh, that means a lot. I'm sure this won't be the last time. And, people have had more fun homework assignments that I've given them. People have had way worse homework assignments. You never know what you're going to get, but really, this was great. Is there anything you want to share with folks? Anywhere you want to direct them before we sign off?
I am, I believe, Adam D at Blue Sky. And I'll say I am a guest on another Superman podcast a lot called Last Sons of Krypton. My last appearance, I did Absolute Superman #1, and then a yet to be released episode. We're going to be doing the catching up with that.
Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you, audience. I hope you enjoyed this bonus episode. I felt like our Loeb Kelly coverage, our Worlds at War coverage would not be complete if we didn't really dig into this. So thank you. Make sure you come back next Tuesday for Superman Batman Public Enemies. It's the last episode before our milestone 200th. Don't miss any of it. Until then, as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. Support the podcast and receive exclusive content, including bonus episodes, by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. Flat Squirrel Podcasts is home to Digging for Kryptonite and another exciting episode in the adventures of Superman. Please subscribe, rate, and review today, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. Links are in the show notes. Thank you all